Welcome to IT Trendsetters. My name is Chris Lee. Kirk, it looks like you shaved the mustache.
I did. November is over.
Thank you, John, for scheduling this on December 1st, because if this was November 30th, it would have been a much different call.
I'm happy to help in any way.
John, can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get going?
Yeah, sure. I'm John Insinski, VP of Security Operations at Expel. The way to think about Expel is we're a BYOT SOC as a service.
Cool. Kirk, what are we talking about today?
BYOT SOC as a service. What I think is really unique about Expel, like you mentioned, is it's a bring your own technology SOC as a service. We'll talk a little bit about that today too, versus some of the platform players and things that you have to put their technology in there. They use a lot of those platforms, but just kind of where the market is today, the kind of threats that are being seen, and then where the market's headed with kind of the alphabet soup now of service provider acronyms that you can use today to help get a better handle on your network.
Yep. Looking forward to the conversation for sure.
Great. So let's kick it off. You just issued your third quarter report a little while ago, and where are people getting attacked, and maybe start summarizing that.
Yeah, sure. So it's a good starting point. Let me provide some background and context. So we are a BYOT SOC as a service. What I mean by that is we do not ship an agent. We don't ship a network appliance. We don't require customers to purchase a SIM. What we do is we integrate with the technology our customers have already invested in. So that gives us unique visibility across endpoints, network devices, visibility into cloud applications and cloud infrastructure. And also think about Expel as we provide a SOC as a service. We're monitoring hundreds of customers every day from various cyber attacks. So really, our quarterly threat report is rooted in telling listeners and readers, like, what are we seeing? What types of attacks that we're seeing? So really the TLDR, Kirk, is about 60% of the incidents that we detect on behalf of our customers are identity-based. And what I mean by that is we're not finding malware on endpoints. 60% of the time we're seeing attackers compromise credentials, typically via phishing emails. I'd also like to throw in, there's probably a little bit of password spraying and credential stuffing, like reusing compromised credentials. And what we're seeing is a high degree of compromised credentials used to break into typically email applications, like SaaS email applications, specifically Microsoft 365.
That's kind of interesting, because our pen test group, that's a lot of what we do when we're pen testing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really viable attack path. It's listen, there's a lot of great defenses in terms of protecting an endpoint from malicious code execution. And you and I had chatted previously about living off the land in terms of using programs that already exist to execute things that they shouldn't. But when we think about breaking into an email account, it's a really viable attack path into an organization. Like, I can land in your email account, possibly undetected. I can sit and monitor and kind of read the level of access that you have, and maybe use it as a pivot point into other applications, like payroll information, like Workday. So one thing to call out is, in our monitoring, we have seen a shift from a focus just on emails and using that access into email accounts to pivot into payroll applications like Workday, with the goal or objective to modify your payroll settings to an attacker-controlled bank account. So at the end of the day, it's a viable attack path, and we're seeing that attack path used to perpetuate payroll fraud.
It's funny because we're seeing that in our own company. It's amazing. I wouldn't think Centercom is big enough to have to worry about that, but we've had some very specific targeted attacks on people that used to work at the company, that so they'll be on the LinkedIn and everything, and they'll say, "Oh, we're doing a new infrastructure project. We'd like Centercom's help." And
yeah,
I'll be your interface for it. And
yeah, there's a high degree. Yeah, there's a high degree of targeting, and third-party applications like LinkedIn and Google and the internet provide a lot of rich information. I think the other thing that we've seen organizations, I don't want to say struggle with, but maybe not maybe thinking about it the right way, is organizations. A lot of the organizations we protect have multi-factor authentication enabled for email, and that's amazing. That is a really good start. But what we're seeing is, as more organizations deploy multi-factor authentication to make it harder to break into the account, what we're seeing is attackers are bypassing MFA by using MFA fatigue attacks. So I think your organization has done the right thing. I've got a cloud identity provider with MFA doing push notifications. Well, the attackers are going, okay, cool, I'm going to compromise credentials, and I'm just going to keep pushing. I'm going to send push notifications until Kirk goes, yeah, fine, I don't care, just whatever, leave me alone. And it's really became a viable attack path for that. So a big majority of the successful compromises we're seeing that are getting through MFA are not some fancy exploitation of MFA or so on and so forth. It's just, I'm going to keep sending it until you accept, because at that point, an employee may say, well, it must be IT. It must be legit. So from a defensive side, there are ways to monitor and alert on when you see a high volume of push notification requests to a particular account. But also for employees or anyone listening, like some of these cloud identity providers or MFA providers provide an easy way to report something as suspicious. So click that button and maybe your IT or security team can pick up and investigate further.
That's a great one of where you have to really have the right, well, you have to have the right controls, and the insurance industry really drove some of those, wanting some kind of a modern EDR and then pushing MFA, those combination of those two and some kind of a log system. And then, you know, in order to even give you insurance, but it looks like it's gone too far. They just didn't give enough guidance on what actually you need to do.
You know, I think it's more, my opinion, it's a really good call. I love the thinking, because what you're saying, it's like, okay, we're seeing these patterns and trends, and then we're going to use, you know, policy or insurance, recommendations to push organizations to, meet certain requirements as it relates to security. But the way I think about that is, that's kind of the natural evolution of like good guy versus bad guy. It's like, okay, good guy's moving over here, the attacker or bad guy is going to adjust to those things as well. And one call out is, if you look what's happening in pre-ransomware activity, I know we're kind of shifting the focus with Microsoft's announcement that they're going to make it harder to, execute the macro enabled documents downloaded from the internet. You're seeing attackers shift to utilizing different techniques. So the bottom line is, I think, for every, with the advancement of good comes the advancement of evil is the bottom line. That's the way I think about it.
Yes, the silver bullet is not existing. It's getting closer. We're trying to get closer and closer, but
yeah,
it seems like every silver bullet has lots of other components it enables.
Yeah, it's probably a good time to talk about, there is phish resistant MFA, like fast ID online specific protocols, probably a good time to talk about that. What I mean by that is like, push notifications could be susceptible to man in the middle activity or even just MFA fatigues. If you're talking like, I don't know, biometrics as it relates to, phish resistant FIDO MFA, that might be a viable option for organizations looking to take it even a step further. Now, if that's not a viable option, like, wow, that's going to require significant investment. Now, some of the MFA identity providers are doing something called like number matching to reduce the likelihood and risk of just MFA fatigue attacks. So it is worth looking at. I know, Duo, OneLogin, I even think Microsoft offers some number matching features, or at least they're on some of their product roadmaps to kind of address this issue as well.
Great. So that gets into a little bit of the control issues. With bring your own technology, are there what's like the minimum things you really need to effectively get the signals you need to? I know you have your response time. I think it's worth mentioning what your goal is to respond to once you've detected an incident. I think that's really aggressive, and what signals you actually need to live up to that.
Oh man, it's a good question. Is now to answer the comment regarding, what's the general aim? Our aim is to go from alert to fix in 30 minutes or less. Let me kind of describe what that means. That means alert hits the queue, it's put in front of a human analyst, and what we want to do is make a decision and take remediation actions within 30 minutes. What I'm not talking about, Kirk, there is like investigating the totality of the event, because what I don't want to do is tell an analyst, move faster, move faster. What I want them to do is identify the activity, maybe go ahead and contain that host or disable the account, and with that system under isolation, they can further investigate that activity to tell the appropriate story. So I did want to just provide that context. Now, your comment regarding minimal amount of visibility, oh my goodness, that is probably it's pretty. I'll say that's subjective. The way I think about it is I want to maximize the value of the security technology our customers have. Now, given someone that used to do enterprise incident response for a living, I love when we have EDR visibility. I love when we have access to, application or authentication events to determine to really tell the whole story. But if you're asking for my opinion, visibility in the endpoint, visibility into the network, probably some authentication logging in a SIM. If you have cloud applications or SaaS applications, knowing what's happening from an authentication perspective is really valuable. And even from an activity standpoint, example, if you're a Microsoft 365 and have email, not only do you want to record authentication activity, but you probably want to record things like inbox rule creation, because that can be, either insider threat potentially, or most likely could be indications of an external attacker. And if you're in cloud infrastructure, probably, consuming system logs and AWS, they call it CloudTrail, just to gain a sense of the API calls and the authentication activity happening in your environment. So really, I guess the way I answer that, Kirk, is like more visibility is better, is the TLDR there.
Great. Well, it's given that, when you get maybe a second to explain, your unique value proposition with the bring your own technologies versus some of the competitors, and you're seeing in the market, like Mandiant got bought up by Google, I think, right? You get all these kind of get these big system providers also trying to get into the security game. So what do they do well? What do you do well? What's the difference if I'm trying to analyze what I need to be doing?
Yeah, I'll give you like a really kind of, be super candid. I've been with Expel since, I'll call it day one or day zero. After the founders raised the Series A, I got a phone call and they said, do you want to join? And I said, that sounds really hard. I'd love to help. And all that to say, I remember, being day one or day two at Expel, and we sat down and we said, okay, what are the problems or challenges that we see in the market? This is how the conversation went. We saw two really big, massive challenges. The first one was, okay, customers are unhappy. They don't know what they're getting. There's no transparency. Okay, fine. And our answer to that is like, your analyst or any customer can see the same thing that our analysts can. Okay, that's super important. But number two, we wanted onboarding to be super easy, like measured in minutes or hours, because what we saw in the market was you go with a big legacy provider and it could be months or like years into the thing and you're not even fully deployed. And so our unique value proposition is like transparency, you see what we see, and onboarding is really easy. For the most part, it's like cutting API keys or knowing who you have to talk to in your organization just to get the level of authentication that we need to connect to these devices. So when I think about that, it's like, you see what we see, onboarding is easy, and we're maximizing the investment that you've made in terms of security tech, backed by what I think is a high quality MDR service. I think the value proposition speaks for itself. That's kind of in a nutshell, Rick. Or Kirk, I'm sorry.
Great. So where do you, given where it is today, there's a lot of, I saw one of the manufacturers kind of mention that no one really has critical mass in the, for lack of a term, managed security world. There's a lot of parts, a lot of moving parts. Putting your hat on, how do you see this playing out over the next few years and becoming, is it going to consolidate, or are we going to keep having lots of different approaches, or what do you see happening?
I think we'll continue to see different approaches and then eventually likely a consolidation. What I see in the market is there's organizations that have made an investment, a heavy investment into EDR, and there are competitors that do that well. But when you're looking at what's happened with identity, like compromise of credentials, the rise of business email compromise, and that particular fraud, you really need an answer to both. You can't just say, I'm only going to monitor the endpoint, because the reality is there are so many different classes of attacks happening. You talked about it. You said, pen tests or red teams will just break into SaaS applications because I'm not touching EDR. So you have to be able to do that. There are still really big parts of the market that want more of a managed SIM model. Like, okay, I don't want you to connect with my technology. I want you to just like log into my technology and take care of it that way as well. Where I'm hoping we take our organization is continuing the model we have of integrating with the technology, but further investment to make it obvious in terms of what's happening in the underlying technology as well. Because right now we have a platform and a portal, and you log into that. Where I'm hoping we take the organization is like being more representative downstream. Basically, you can log into an appliance and know exactly what Expel did with a given alert, rather than having to log directly into our platform itself. Hopefully that resonates. So bottom line, I think there's multiple segments of the market that understand EDR and identity is really big. And I still think there's big parts of the market that still think I can do all of that out of a traditional based SIM. And longer term, what I think is we'll probably have a consolidation.
Sure. It seems like it's an indirect. You watch at different parts of the industry, and they've consolidated somewhat quick. But this is a much more difficult piece to consolidate.
Yeah, and we work with a lot of cloud first companies, and these are startup companies that were born in AWS or GCP, And their use cases, we want you to monitor cloud infrastructure. Okay, I don't have a Windows Active Directory domain. I've got laptops and maybe with an EDR. And so that's really a big part of the segment we serve. But then we have, those more traditional enterprises where it's like, and there's my Q radar, right? And there's my Splunk enterprise security. And so it's our advantage, I'll be candid, our advantage is we get to serve both of those types of markets. So it really pushes us in unique directions to be able to respond accordingly. But there are certainly different segments in the market. And I think a lot of it has to do with sometimes where that business is in their journey. Like if it's a new startup, they're going to be in AWS, GCP, they're going to have some Mac laptops. But if you're dealing with large enterprises, they're still going to have that SIM and they want you to drive value out of that as well. Hopefully that resonates.
Sure. And then you mentioned one of the other things is a lot of the attacks to get away from the simple controls of foreign countries and things is people relaying through US-based IP addresses to fall underneath that radar also.
Yeah, it's a really good call out. And so, when you're trying to do look at atypical authentication activity and just think, okay, if I got remote access into the org via, a VPN, or even I've got webmail, I want to be able to alert on some atypical activity is, a couple years ago, when we were flagging some of these suspicious logins or, stolen credentials, it was as easy as saying, okay, flag the alert if the IP address is geolocated in certain countries. Like, okay, we'll generate an alert, we'll do some IP enrichment lookup, and then if the country code is this, we'll send an alert. Well, attackers, we go back to that advancement with good comes the advancement of evil statement. They were like, okay, cool. So what I'll do is I'll just sign up for a VPN service. I'll be geolocated within the United States, and now I'm able to bypass those controls. Think of those particular settings where organization doesn't have multi-factor auth, but they have like conditional access policies where it says, if source IP address is not geolocated here, go ahead and drop it. Well, if I turn on my VPN, I can get right in. So it goes to show you advancement of good with evil, and just doing conditional access to block logins from atypical countries just isn't enough, because attackers are now using hosting infrastructure and VPN services with IP addresses that are geolocated here domestically.
So it kind of builds off the whole thing of this underground of access brokers that basically bad guys can buy valid accounts on platforms. Is there a way to catch that? What do you guys do to handle things like that?
Our main value prop there is looking and monitoring for use of stolen credentials, for looking for atypical authentication activity. One of the other things that we do is we can alert on indications of password spraying. What I really mean is like evidence of credential stuffing. And in those scenarios, what we'll see is from the same source IP address, we're seeing multiple login failures, but we're looking for a succeeded. Because if logins are failure, okay, you don't have the right username and password combination. But if suddenly one of them succeeds, okay, cool. Now we have a problem. Let's go ahead and go forth and conquer and go through our investigative response policy as well. So you can tie that activity together to find a compromised credential, is a long story short.
Okay. So what is Expel working on? What's the new thing? If I was looking for a roadmap, where are you headed?
Yeah, so we're going to be launching a service around Kubernetes monitoring, which is super cool. In fact, our SOC just started triaging Kubernetes alerts from our own infrastructure. And that's really exciting because our SOC gets to know Kubernetes, specifically GKE, and what it means to look for atypical activity in Kubernetes. So we're learning, we're coming up to speed. One of our first alerts, we alerted on some weird activity in a Kubernetes cluster in one of the Google East regions. It was legitimate activity, but it's cool that our SOC can see that and work with their engineering team to say, hey, were you doing that, so on and so forth. So Kubernetes is coming. That's the big thing that I'm really excited about. We're also going to be bringing to market a managed vulnerability management capability where we can provide our customers more context about the vulnerabilities that matter. What does that mean? It's like, okay, these vulnerabilities should likely take priority first because we're seeing bad guys use them to break into organizations. And oh, by the way, you are vulnerable. So managed vulnerability management in our Kubernetes monitoring service, I'm pretty excited about.
That's good. That's all closing that window of opportunity.
Yeah, again, going back to your really good question regarding level of visibility, as being a defender for my entire career, like more visibility, the better. That doesn't mean data overload. That means the right visibility into the right segments.
Okay, great. So, like you said, the different parts of the industry have kind of morphed a little bit. The EDR guys kind of grew up overnight, And then, but now they're trying to move into other parts. So how do you see that playing out with what you guys are doing? And I generally don't see people that are good at one thing applying it to everything else. A lot of times there's challenges with that. So I guess any feedback for people on that? Then you got the network guys, for lack of a better term, you got the Palo Altos trying to do everything. You've got like the EDRs trying to move into the other parts. And then you got you guys who are managing all the technologies. So that I'm curious how that affects your relationships and everything else.
You know, from a relationship standpoint, it's interesting. I probably can't give the listeners anything interesting there, but it's a really good call out. And what I mean to say there is since we kind of grew up being EDR focused and identity focused, like we had that advantage, like we're doing this, right? We didn't have to learn that or unlearn other things is probably what I'm trying to say. What's required more of what I'll call like a intentional effort is it's going to sound funny, is getting really, really good at integrating with SIM technologies. Because we were in the cloud, we're doing identity and EDR, we almost had to turn backwards and go, oh yeah, we need to be good at that as well, right? So our advantage was we're doing identity and EDR, but we had to be really intentional for how we even think about integrating with SIMs as an organization as well. Some of that is, you got to remember, there are a number of unhappy customers that have these old legacy SIMs as well, right? Yeah, and so part of it is like, we really went on this journey as we've grown as an organization in terms of running to those big, large enterprises. So part of it was better understanding of what does great look like in that context, and then even eliminating our own biases. Because remember, if a lot of the folks on my team and organization used to do enterprise IR for a living. So we're like, EDR, we're going to do some forensic data. SIM is cool for investigation. But we've really had to take a concerted effort for saying, no, we're going to consume these alerts from these various SIMs and be able to maximize the value we're able to provide for customers. So hopefully that was insightful. That's a super candid look in terms of behind the scenes.
Yes. It's you said a quickly moving industry, very fragmented, which makes it even more difficult because, people are all trying different approaches, and then you have to get your message above the noise that everybody else is creating out there. Yeah.
One of the things I think we do well as an organization is like, we're a learning organization. So like, the way we think about it today may not be the way we think about it tomorrow. And the other approach that I think we do okay is like, we're constantly learning from our customers, right? We're not showing up with the answers. We're like, here's how we think about it. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, cool. And the long story short is it's just incremental iterative improvement to providing better value for our customers.
And the systems you've developed to support that. That's
absolutely.
I think it's not just process. You've also got quick learning systems that allow you to continually take what you're seeing a lot of and optimize that quickly. Yeah.
And so to me, process is not bureaucracy. It's not, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. Process is learning and iterating again and again and again and again. So even, yesterday I was with my entire SOC leadership, and we're at this point of our journey where we sat down and said, okay, how do we want to be organized now that we're getting to this part of our journey? It's all to say, like, learning and iterating has to happen as you continue to scale and grow as a business. Plus, you're also getting that feedback from your customers in the market, and reacting to that is super important.
Right. Well, you've been through a few iterations already, and now you're taking the next iteration, and staying agile and iterating, and that's a huge advantage compared to a lot of the monolithic approaches to it. So
yeah,
exciting for your future. It looks really, really exciting, and looking forward to see how it all evolves.
Yeah, it's very exciting. The only constant is change is kind of my belief at this point. And that's one of the really, big lessons by joining a startup so early. You're here from it. You're at ground zero, getting to see and experience it, because, the organization changes every so months as you add more and more people. And with that, the organization gets better, because go back, you're learning and iterating again and again. It's really exciting.
Right. And as I would imagine, as like you mentioned, Mandy, I think you spent some time there that's got sucked in by Google. They only see part of the traffic in the world too. They don't see all the traffic, but they've got some really intelligent learning and things. But that should only help your systems get better too, because they'll be able to apply that knowledge.
Yeah, I'd be really curious in terms of to see, how they're able to apply the threat intelligence to, I'm saying, like, doing high quality threat detection and response in GCP. I believe they also have the Chronicle product. So it'd be interesting. I imagine, from a competitive standpoint, they're going to want to deploy that threat intelligence into that product is the best way they can. And then the detection content as well. We have an integration with that SIM. So we'll be able to, take advantage of that as well. Because when you think about it, since we integrate with the tech, the better that technology is, we're in a better position to provide value for our customers. So it's a win-win across the board, I guess you could say.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting I just was reading about yesterday is obviously when you have all these different platforms, you got to figure out how AWS works, how does the Azure work, how does GP. Now they want to overlay abstraction layer on top of there, which is going to hurt their visibility, because now you're going to have this abstraction layer that makes it all look like it's doing the same thing in all those clouds. But you still have underneath the covers, you still got all these different alerts coming from different platforms that were originally designed for a different purpose, and they're trying to all play off their strengths, and that's why they have multiple clouds out there.
Yeah. And you said something I'll just tap on just a little bit, because it is important, is, I've got, when you're getting alerts from multiple different data sources, one of the things that we do on our platform to help our analysts is, like, let's say we put an alert in front of a SOC analyst, we're automatically using workflows to say, did any other alerts fire from any of the other integrated technology? So imagine if you have an EDR alert that says suspicious PowerShell activity executed, but then you also have a story of, like, well, Palo Alto Networks detected download of a suspicious file directly preceding that. Right after the EDR alert, Palo Alto is now saying you've got command and control traffic. Bottom line, that visibility across the entire tech stack provides, capabilities to SOC analysts in your security team. So I just wanted to tap on that briefly.
So I have another question that could be a good question, or it might be a dumb one. You can cut that off. Is that you see like a Palo Alto strategy is they have this SOC in the cloud that's going to have logs coming from all over the place. The log expense from all these clients is going to get to be enormous, for people are taking different logs and copying them in different places all over, so they can all pull their piece of the puzzle. How would your approach be different than some of these, guys that are trying to take almost like this data lake in the world approach, where they want so much data, and then the cost of how do you do that economically?
Yeah, without giving away too much of the secret sauce is, at a super high level, we looked at this early on as a business and said, okay, we don't want to be in the business of consuming everything, because you got processing and storage associated with that, to your point. So it puts a lot of pressure on our DNR engineering capabilities here at Expel to say, okay, given a technology, when we integrate with it using APIs, we need to make smart decisions about the types of data we need to bring back to enable good learning investigation. We are selective, right? That's the key takeaway. It is not give me all of your data, process all of the things. And that was a conscious business decision we made, because you're right, processing, consumption, and storage on the back end, that's going to dilute your, overall gross margin as well. So from a business perspective, the way we solve that is like, okay, we're going to look at these technologies and consume the right data that we need to enable high quality MDR alerting investigation, and not no more than that, right? It's kind of like, what is that Einstein expression, like as simple as possible, but no simpler, one of those expressions, if you know what I mean.
It's that iterating, in the culture is really going to be the difference over time here, is staying innovative. And
it is. It is. And so, for example, like if a SOC analyst gets an alert and we're not normalizing it the right way, we've built technology where it's like we have a front end or GUI where it's like update that normalization really quickly. So it's, again, this is not like stateful. This is not, we release an integration, it's done. We connect with technology, and it's going into a system where there's constant things and activities that are happening that result in incremental iterative improvements. So over time, the system as a whole just continues to get smarter, believe it or not. Another example is like we have a capability in our platform. It's called customer context, and we can add information to a database. So if imagine an alert comes in and you've got an employee that's, on, vacation overseas, we're going to grab that information and tell our analysts right there in the alert, so they don't have to, do the wrong thing. And so imagine if you're connected to an organization for a long time, it gets a lot smarter because you're ingesting that contextual information more and more.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's easy to understand all this conceptually, how you can pull data from everywhere, but execution and keeping it effective and efficient is the.
It's I tell my management team, we're all managers in the SOC, and we all used to do forensic investigation for a living, but now we're in the business of doing operations management for a living. Right. So instead of here's your book on Windows forensic analysis, they get a book on statistical process control. No kidding, right? What is variance? What does time series analysis look like? And we're not going to talk in medians anymore. We're going to use 75th percentile, 90th percentile to do all these instruments and measurements, because we're really talking about like managing a complex system And it's a high quality analyst, that's rooted in culture and training, but highly effective MDR is rooted in high quality operations management.
Right. Yep. That's your secret sauce. And that's why I think that's, you can play that game and someone else as a particular platform has a lot of other baggage they got to deal with. And the reality is, say I want to go down like the Palo Alto route or the CrowdStrike route. Well, not everybody's going to have that, right? So they're already limited to a certain number of people. If you don't have Palo Alto, you're probably not going to buy Palo Alto's SIM, right? You know what I'm saying? Or so they're kind of boxed in to a certain degree that they probably can only ever serve at most 30% of the market because that's all their market share is, and that's for the people that really even buy into their platform. Do everything.
Yep.
So they've kind of got a self-regulated governor versus yourselves, which are more, let's embrace the new technologies as the paradigm shift and use those to make our tools better. Which is a big differentiator. Yeah,
absolutely. And the management of all of those things that are happening is a key component of why I think we've been able to be successful.
Yep, that's great. Look forward to continuing our relationship.
Yeah, me as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yep. All right, Chris.
Jonathan, so just to wrap things up, what advice do you have for kind of these security departments going forward in somewhat of a challenging economic environment that we're about to head into?
Oh, geez, I think that's a great question. I think, well, first and foremost, I think from an operator's perspective, I think MFA everywhere if you can, preferably, I'm going to call, push notifications and preferably phish resistant MFA if you can. I think MFA is really, really important. I think, on top of that, I think we're headed into some challenging times. Budget strategy, I hate to say something that high level, but, budget is strategy at the end of the day. The high mark of effective management is the ability to look out in the future and with reasonable certainty, understand what's going to happen. Do that, understand what your budget looks like. I'm also really big about people. Take care of your people. It's hard out there. I know that sounds just, cliche and pretty basic, but take care of your people. Budget is strategy, MFA everywhere. That's probably my top 3.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on IT Trendsetters.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Anything else we want to patch in there?
I think is there anything I missed or anything, Jonathan? I think we talked about a lot of different pieces.
No, you rocked it. I thought that was a lot of fun. You rocked it. Yeah. That was great.
I did. The one term I did notice is you had business application compromise versus.
It's cool. It's like BEC getting in the email, BAC access to your application data. It's fine. I'm not really worried about it.
Yeah, when I had Matt Peters on, I asked him, how do you, and I always ask, I love to ask this question because we wrap up here is, a big part of people's world going forward are all going to be all these APIs tied together. And that is really that data they collect. And now you have these data brokers that take your data you're collecting from all these APIs and validate them and make sure, almost a reverse version of an API. You can't trust the sources of the data coming in necessarily. We're working on customers with that. We have an app dev group where we're feeding them data before it goes to their service now. It takes all that data we feed them and validates it against some other things before it sends it to service now for like assets and things like that. So now how do you monitor those types of things? All these, because the unique, the custom apps and the custom APIs all over the place.
Yeah, I think, we will use some third-party products to use some API monitoring. We've got some capabilities or solutions there. Now, from where I sit in the organization within security operations, working more and more with our customers to do what I'll call, when I say custom detection, it's detection specific to the organization, because looking for API abuse rather than code execution or evil logins. There's going to be more of that in the future. I see it, it's already there. And so what I'm going to be doing is investing more of our DNR engineering expense for that class of detection. Also, from a monitoring and security standpoint, we do work with some third-party products as it relates to API security.
Sure. And then the other one we really didn't talk about that's probably a lot of it out there, at least, is the whole Internet of Things world. And if that's being hit at all.
We're just getting in the business of integrating with IoT things. And that's a different specialty when you think about investigating SCADA networks. If I ask a stock analyst, hey, go investigate that SCADA system, I have no idea what I'm doing. So we're just integrating with those type of technologies like an ARMIS to be able to do that. But again, when we think about another shift, like a seismic shift in our sockets, doing probably IoT-based monitoring, we're close. That will probably be a 2023 thing.
That'll be the next IT Trendsetters we'll get you back on for.
Let's
Yeah.
do it. Rock and roll.
As you're getting more and more micro on that area. I mean, actually, I don't, you guys probably have good visibility into this, but on a particular network, how many devices are window users versus all these other things that they could be, you know, API machines, cameras, printer, you know.
That's it. No, that's it. Like I chat with a lot of customers and prospects, and one of them, without giving away too many details, is like they do I'll call it like shipping, and they've got like robotic containers with that no humans allowed in there. So you're not monitoring like a computer. It's like it's like a video appliance to make sure no humans get out onto the robot floor or something. So I'm excited, but it's also going to be a little bit of a shift in terms of how we think about triage and investigation in our SOC.
Most of those tools don't have a lot of security stacks built into them.
No. So does your IoT or OT environment have direct access to the internet? Oh, it does. Oh boy, this will be fun, right?
I was going to get updates if it doesn't. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, so it will be a fun journey. We're happy to jump back on once we have some learnings to share.
Okay, great. All right.
All right, Jonathan, it was great talking to you. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Take care.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.